Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Reynolds, and I'm going to be doing my media presentation on police corruption in America. This is my student ID, 1567048, and because I went over the time, I'm going to try and be quick and dive right into it. So, when it comes to the topic of police corruption in the criminal justice system, most of us will readily agree that it's a multifaceted issue. Where this argument usually ends, however, is on the question of the extent of corruption throughout the departments, and does the criminal justice system successfully deal with corruption at its core? Whereas some are convinced entire departments across America are dirty, others maintain it's a few bad apples that ruin it for the rest. In this video presentation, I will be attempting to effectively communicate the different types of corruption, when corruption is most likely to occur and the causes behind it, and what the criminal justice system does to implement regulations in order to prevent corruption. From this perspective, it's difficult to grasp corruption without the fundamental understanding of what exactly police corruption is. Police corruption is defined as illegal acts or omissions by a police officer in the line of duty, by virtue of their own official position, receive any gain for themselves or others. Essentially, the class text I've chosen as my main source of information is informing us that at its core, police corruption is the manipulation and misemployment of authority for personal or promotional gain while being an on-duty law enforcement official. With that being said, there are different types of corruption. This is nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. Nonfeasance being the failure to perform an officer's legal duty, misfeasance being the failure to perform the legal duty properly, and malfeasance being the follow-through of an illegal act itself performed by an on-duty officer. Examples of these would be, in this case of nonfeasance, the failure to perform a legal duty by an on-duty officer. The situation would lay out an officer seeing an individual driving recklessly. Instead of pulling them over for whatever reason, be it they are running late, don't have time, or unconcerned, or distracted, they commit nonfeasance by failing to pull over the individual and check for their sobriety. In the case of misfeasance, the scenario would lay out an example of an unnecessary search and seizure of a person's property or their property without probable cause or warrants. Lastly, an example of malfeasance would be an officer taking a bribe or drinking and driving on duty. Now, though these are extreme examples, instances like this have occurred in the past, I want to focus less on specific examples and the broader view of police corruption itself. So, just as important as the different types of corruption are, the explanations of corruption, such as sole individuals acting out of accordance with the law, departmental and environmental structure, as well as problems external to the department itself. To gain a fundamental understanding of this, I want to provide examples on this as well. On an individual side of things, this can be considered, as mentioned earlier, a few bad apples or those with low moral and ethical standards. One way the criminal justice system deals with eliminating this characteristic of corruption starts at how they go about hiring potential candidates for law enforcement. By assessment testing, background checks, checking in on references listed, an officer potentially hiring a candidate is more likely to understand their moral adequacy, and because on-duty officers are expected to make a large amount of quick, discretion-based calls, it's important to hire those that reflect their core values at a minimum. Next, we focus on departmental aspects of corruption itself. I enjoyed the explanation given by the text more than anything I could say, and that is, if corruption itself cannot be explained in terms of a few bad apples, then the barrel itself must be examined. By this example, the text properly communicates that if it's not the individual officers themselves, there is a larger potential for the department to be the root of corruption. How officers perceive their supervisors is largely important, and I feel departments that lack effective leadership can cause more damage to a society than any one individual can. The subculture in law enforcement departments are very close-knit, and officers feel more inclined to secrecy or intimidation to not report things or speak out against corruption. The code of ethics is brought into this portion of corruption, which we'll dive into in more detail later, but on the note of corruption in the department, there is a moral and ethical promise to report any form of corruption by any person in law enforcement, no matter how high that person may rank. It is their responsibility and promise, and if an officer sees something, it is absolutely their responsibility to speak up and protect this community. This is the oath that they gave, and whether they are misinformed or completely spot on, they would be wrong in not saying something in the first place. Lastly, you have factors external to the department, more so mentioned as government actions. On the one hand, you have government officials committing things such as gambling, prostitution, drug use. On the other hand, you have incompetent management over police forces that can become a haphazard, resulting in corruption. Or lastly, you have an officer's climate. Places in America, such as Chicago, that due to the climate are more prone to corruption and illegal acts for the simple fact that it's ample and in full effect around them. It may cause an officer's ability to perform properly on duty, resulting in nonfeasance, misfeasance, or even malfeasance. Ultimately, what is at stake here is the question of how does law enforcement really take on the issue of corruption? In the face of these traits, characteristics, and environments that support corruption and cause it to spread like wildfire, are the broader implications of corruption so deeply rooted that complete elimination is out of the question? This interpretation challenges law enforcement, though in my personal opinion, I believe they do a good job maintaining accountability. I believe this for a few reasons, but the largest being my research on the Code of Ethics earlier this semester, the International Association of Police Chiefs, and the UN Code of Ethics. The Code of Ethics, to its forefront, deals with issues of ethics such as training in ethics, ethics policies, promotional and professional standards, and ethics reports. There are 8 articles to the code, and I want to briefly address them. 1. To act ethically as if no one were looking. 2. Addressing how officers treat their citizens. 3. The use of force. 4. Privacy and disclosing information. 5. Inhumane punishment and treatment. 6. How law enforcement protects those in their custody regardless of what laws may have been broken. 7. The promise to remain pure and not commit acts of corruption. And lastly, 8. How an officer of the law should act in accordance with the oath every day they are on duty. Now, these have been intensely watered down just for the sake of the 5-minute video. But if you want more information, go to the Code of Ethics. For the Code of Ethics and their oath, go to the International Association of Police Chiefs website. There you will find everything you need to gain a more fundamental understanding of the Code of Ethics itself and the oath officers take and make every single day. Some major topics and issues associated with the International Association of Police Chiefs are crime and violence, community and police relations, mass casualty, and drugs and alcohol. Though these aren't all of the topics, in my research I found that these were the most relevant and had the most relevance to what I had read. I feel it's important to note that through my research I found no data suggesting that corruption occurs in larger or smaller agencies. As multifaceted as departments go, I found no correlation that smaller agencies held higher rates of corruption than those of agencies that were double in size. My hope now is by now you have a fundamental understanding of what police corruption is, how and why it occurs, when it is most likely to occur, and what government agencies do to prevent, eliminate, and hold accountability towards corruption throughout America. Thank you for your time.